Yes. All right. Let's go to immigration police state and I should get police squad in color. Starring Leslie Nielsen. Also starring. All right. Let's go with this. David Beer of the Cato Institute. David Beer of the Cato Institute offers the pro-crackdown Senator Kennedy real information on not just the duplicitous DHS delaying or not acting at all on honest and legal immigration applications. Rubio is in this as well. But that the U.S. government took the application cash from foreigners who wanted to move here and has refused to engage in the process that the feds created as part of their so-called claim to control immigration. Again, centralized, bureaucratic, venal, and corrupt. So those are a lot of words fit in right after some heavy Led Zeppelin. So let me run through this again. Cato Institute's David Beer, he handles their immigration policy analysis. He offered the pro-immigration crackdown man, Senator Kennedy, real information on not just the duplicitous DHS delaying or not acting at all on honest and legal immigration applications, but that the government took their money and refused to engage in the actual process. So here's David's ex post. We want your money, honey. Here it is. Oh, where is it? Where's this post? Yep, here it is. He says, I testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee. I discussed the largest fraud in the history of the U.S. immigration system perpetrated by DHS and the State Department. Even Republicans on the committee were shocked by what this administration is doing to legal immigrants. So check this out. This is great.
Chairman Cornyn, Ranking Member Padilla, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. For nearly half a century, the Cato Institute's research has shown that people of any ancestry, background, or birthplace can be assets in a free society. America's immigrants exemplify this truth. Despite often leaving terrible conditions abroad, immigrants work, start businesses, and invent at higher rates than the U.S.-born population. Cato's recent analysis shows that immigrants reduced deficits by $11.5 trillion over the last 30 years, including about $140 billion in Minnesota. Although welfare fraud is a serious problem, immigrants aren't to blame. Non-citizens account for just 5% of welfare fraud losses, 31% less per capita than U.S. citizens. Rather than targeting entire ethnic groups, Congress should end the broken welfare systems, namely the oversight-free aid to states that led to all the fraud in Minnesota. But let's be clear, DHS isn't anti-fraud. DHS is itself openly carrying out the largest fraud in the history of the U.S. immigration system. DHS and the State Department are raking in billions of dollars in immigration fees and not providing the adjudications that applicants are entitled to. For individuals for over 90 countries, half of all legal immigrants, the administration is simply not processing their applications. The burden of proof is already on these applicants. DHS and state can deny anyone who fails to make their case. Instead, this administration is pocketing thousands of dollars from hardworking Americans and their relatives, including spouses and minor children of U.S. citizens, and then not even looking at their applications. This is a scam. It is fraud. DHS's entire Minnesota operation is another kind of scam sold to the public on lies. DHS hasn't criminally charged anyone with fraud there, and 60% of its immigrant arrests in Minnesota have no criminal convictions or charges. DHS itself classifies just 8% of its arrests in Minnesota as the highest threat level. And 3/4 of arrests it classifies as not being a threat at all. Instead of arresting fraudsters, it's seeking to jail 5,600 legal vetted refugees, nursing mothers, single parents, long-term residents, already dragged away from their families without any evidence of fraud at all.
Now, I want to turn to the interaction as Senator Kennedy starts to ask him a question here and see if I can go over to that. This is the introduction. And this looks like it might be another post that I'm going to be maybe jumping over into with the senator. So let me see if I can grab that one here. Yeah, here it is. This is the one where we have, listen to how shocked Senator Kennedy was. This is great. And this is, I think, important to check out. Here we go.
Been a long day. Mr. Beyer, am I saying your name right?
It's Mr. Beer.
Mr. Beer. I like beer better.
Most people do.
Tell me that, I think I heard you say that some people, some folks who've come to our country and are trying to get status to stay, have applied to the Department of Health of DHS, and they've paid money, and DHS is doing nothing.
Oh, that's right. Yep, they're sitting on their applications, not processing them.
That's a pretty bold statement. How many people? I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't know. How many people we're talking about?
About half of the immigrant flow right now.
So
90 countries are affected by the State Department ban.
How many people is that?
Well, it's at least 300,000 abroad and probably twice that when you consider the people already in the U.S.
So 300,000 folks have gone to DHS to seek some kind of permanent status or semi-permanent status to stay. At least 300,000, and they paid money to DHS, and DHS has done nothing. Is that
That's right. Yeah, they're sitting on their applications.
Well, who at DHS is
putting
doing
them in the trash?
Who at DHS is doing this?
Oh, it's Joseph Edlow. He's in charge of it. He came up with this policy to just.
Who is he?
He's the head of USCIS. Joseph Edlow is the head of USCIS. He came up with this policy
DHS?
where he is just.
Slow down a minute, man. You've had too much coffee. Is he he's at DHS?
I'm just from New Jersey. So.
I understand. Great state too. Who does he report to?
Secretary Noem, of course.
Okay. Does Secretary Noem know whether this?
I don't know what Secretary Noem knows, but she's aware of the general tenor of this administration.
What's his name?
Joseph Edlow.
Mr. Edlow. Who's his boss?
Secretary Noem.
Oh, okay. And you can document all this?
Oh, absolutely. They put out a memorandum saying we're not processing these people. And Secretary Rubio is involved as well when it comes to the State Department.
Would you send me that memo, please?
I will absolutely send that to you.
I went way over. I'm sorry. John.
I appreciate that.
Senator Kennedy.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting coming from some of the work that I got to do over my life and training in Washington, D.C. You know, there are a lot of great scholars at Cato. Sometimes maybe their orientation isn't exactly like Mises on libertarian stuff or, you know, whatever. But, you know, when you get a guy like David Beer going in there, you can tell, you know, he's not fooling around. He's got the information. And I admire people who don't screw around. Like, they're not going to just be walking on the surface. They're going to get the information and back up what they're researching and make sure that it is solid. And you can see that Senator Kennedy didn't know this, and he was actually satisfied to know that. Now, I don't think it's going to shake Senator Kennedy out of his incorrect stance that the federal government should have something to do with immigration policy. But that, again, would be an area where if you could present it and put it in front of him, at least that would be a nice opportunity to say, here, look at this. See whether or not you can get an internal comfort zone to say, I understand that this argument is correct, but I'm not going to comply with the actual system of the Constitution. I'm not going to comport with it. because I've run into that over and over again with people. Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. And now I'm going to do something completely different. They do it all the time when it comes to immigration. It's like a religion. It's just it, and they won't go to the Constitution. They'll go to stare decisis and the Supreme Court, which is as bad as saying the Dred Scott decision was good or Roe v. Wade was good. You use your own mind. You compare. You see what is ethical, what is constitutional. It's just it's incredible. But if it fits with what they want for their agenda, they'll be hands off. And then they get angry at you for just bringing up like, hey, well, you had a standard there. What about over here? Right? It's just crazy. That is big. That's a big one from David Beer of Cato. Now, Cato's been doing a ton of work recently. So I want to give you some information, some other information here. I've got this. This is a major development for these men and for the growing body of evidence. Now, this isn't Cato. We'll get into some of the economic stuff in just a minute. It reveals ICE, Border Patrol, DHS criminality. Check this out. This is some of the courtroom side, okay? So we're sort of staying scholarly, a little dry here, but I want to give you some of this information so you know what's going on out there in the various states. Now, officially, it has been confirmed that all 3 people ICE shot in Minnesota were unjustified shootings, homicides. In all 3 cases, DHS initially made up information. Kyle Cheney writes this: after detaining these men, generating national headlines about a broom or so-called shovel attack, detaining one of the defendant's partners, and separating them from their 1-year-old son, the Trump administration drops the charges, citing newly discovered evidence. Now, these guys weren't killed, but they have here newly discovered evidence in this matter. This is the court, Daniel S. Rosen, U.S. attorney, dropping the charges against these guys. Newly discovered evidence in this matter is materially inconsistent with the allegations of the complaint affidavit. That's from DHS on January 16th as ECF 11, as well as the preliminary hearing testimony that was based on information presented to the affiant. Accordingly, dismissal with prejudice will serve the interests of justice. So in other words, DHS was going after these guys. The court found that the DHS claims were bogus, and these guys cannot be brought back. It's with prejudice. You can't bring it back. Amazing. And the Trump administration just made a deal with Peter Thiel's Clearview to collect facial biometric ID information and tag people as part of the Fed's immigration terror campaign. You see this inside my news notes as well. Jason Bassler writes, Border Patrol just bought full access to Clearview's 60B image dragnet, the facial ID startup backed by Peter Thiel. Its 20% error rate, sort of like lavender that the Israelis use to wipe out whole families in Gaza, its 20% error rate in tactical targeting could land you in the domestic terrorist database. Of course, that's the amorphous term. They can apply it to virtually anything. But hey, Epstein's friends are cashing in. Of course they are. Of course. And we've got more ICE malfeasance. ICE ram into the front of someone's truck in New Jersey, hold a U.S. citizen at gunpoint. Agents point the gun directly at unarmed person outside of the truck, right in the middle of the street in morning traffic. Yeah. So give you this. Here we go. Check it out. The incident occurred in Hopatcong, New Jersey, about 25 miles northwest of Newark. And they're literally standing there with their guns drawn in the middle of the street as the dude stands there after they hit the guy. Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Nothing like police action, huh? And then we want to talk about medics getting attacked. Here's this. This is something I didn't know about. One of the medics at the scene told WMW that police officers attacked and pepper sprayed medics who were assisting injured persons. We were in the middle of treating people at a protest. Medics were attacked as well. And when we talk about medics, you know the woman whom Alex Preddy was trying to protect? She was an EMT. And I believe she was an EMT. She had medical background. She wanted to provide aid to him, and they wouldn't let her get close to him. Now, let me give you some immigration information via the statistics. This from the Cato Institute. Immigrants in the U.S. have reduced the deficit every year since 1994. Now, this is an interesting calculus from David Beer. I'm going to contact them on Monday and see if I can get in touch, see if David would be on with me or one of the other folks from his offices. I remember when Cato was located right next to the Hawk and Dove and the Trover Bookshop, just around the corner from the Library of Congress. And there was a Roy Rogers place where I would get chicken sandwiches. They were great. And you could smell the Roy Rogers. It was just this tiny little hole in the wall, Cato, before they opened up their new building. So immigrants in the U.S. have reduced the deficit every year since 1994, when data collection began. According to a Cato study, immigrants have paid more in taxes than they received in benefits from federal, state, and local governments. So here is the Census Bureau collection information between 1994 and 2003. It is the annual social and economic supplements to the U.S. Census Bureau, which they shouldn't be measuring anyway. But here we go. Let me show it to you big time, a little larger so you can see it. Here's the chart. There you go. So there's 1994, immigrant surplus and deficits. Now, the calculus from this is going to be interesting to crack open. So I'm going to try to read that report from David Beer to see how they calculate this. But it seems like they're calculating it the same way they would calculate it for regular documented Americans or people who were born in the country, right? Now, Stephen Ratner, again, left-wing Ellen Ratner's brother, Trump justifies his brutal immigration tactics by painting illegal immigrants as criminals. But in reality, they commit fewer crimes than native-born Americans. So he has my Morning Joe chart. Crime rate per 100,000 population. U.S.-born citizens, drug violations here, violent crimes here, property crimes here. Legal immigrants, nowhere close. Nowhere close. Nowhere close. All right? And this is per 100,000. 200 per 100,000. Now here, about half for undocumented immigrants. This is within the population. Within their population. Okay? Remember that. Now, what's interesting here is what I think is important is to look at recidivism and how long the people have been here. So, for example, you could have an American, these are some of the sift out things. You could have an American who is, has grown up here, and at 16, 17, he's getting in trouble. And then, over the course of his life, he might have been involved with criminal activity for violent crimes X number of times, where somebody who's a migrant comes in and for a certain year, they look at this information, they measure it year to year. Well, that migrant has only been there how many times? He hasn't committed as many crimes, right? But again, they're measuring it as a proportion for the population, which I think is a big deal. That's a really big deal. So that's cool. Now, Stephen Ratner also has this. Immigrants work in crucial jobs across the American economy. They grow our food, take care of our elderly, build our homes, and tend to our sick. Look at this. Farm laborers, foreign-born share of the workforce, 54%. Home health aides, foreign-born share of the workforce, 40%. Construction, 30%. Physicians and surgeons, 27%. Now, you clamp down on those things, as we see with agriculture, you see what happens. That is a portion of your supply chain, you're now getting it restricted by some arbitrary politician. And again, if somebody would like to say, well, that's the policy I like, here's an idea. Let's just strip away the artifice of the state and then say, you want to effectuate that change? How you do it now? Oh, that's right. How about you form a gang, you get a bunch of guns, and then you threaten all these people to say, you can't employ that person. I don't like it when you do that, so we're going to threaten you. Because that, in effect, is what the government is. The only difference is that you haven't written a little piece of paper that says it gives you legal authority. Or you haven't voted for some other Yahoo who is in an office that says, I have legal authority now in this magic carpet ride. The artifice remains, and the threat is the same. Mother Jones, according to ICE's own data, none of its officers have been killed by an immigrant in the agency's history. Whoops. Hey, Christy. What else do you have to say? Hey, Pam. Over the past year, just the past year, 15 people have died or been killed by DHS ICE Border Patrol because they were held without medicine or they were directly killed. Or some cases, oh, it was suicide. Really? You mean that guy that got asphyxiated by somebody else? Yeah, that was suicide. Oh, yeah, he got Epsteined. Here's this in the courts. The Trump administration has committed a mass violation of ICE detainees' constitutional rights in Minnesota, effectively blocking their access to attorneys at the Whipple building, a judge ruled tonight. This is big. This was their big Operation Metro Surge thing. Here it is. Democracy Forward's got the documents. The judge, Trump appointee Nancy Brazel, said this. It appears that in planning for Operation Metro Surge, the government failed to plan for the constitutional rights of its civil detainees. Now, they are natural rights, supposedly protected by the Constitution. It's better phrasing. The government suggests, with minimal explanation and even less evidence, that doing so would result in, quote, chaos. That's right. How many times have we heard that? We can't give them individual trials and due process. We have to treat them as all one person. Well, that's interesting in this so-called land of the free. You don't have individual rights anymore? It would be impossible to manage because we're kidnapping so many people. We have to have no responsibility in any way. Of course we do. She writes, the Constitution does not permit the government to arrest thousands of individuals and then disregard their, as she says, constitutional rights because it would be too challenging to honor those rights. You hear that, Jeff Cooner? Are you listening? At this preliminary stage, plaintiffs have made a clear showing of likelihood of success of their Fifth Amendment claim. Ah, the Bill of Rights. How weird. And by the way, Todd Lyons, some information. He did work out of Boston for a while, but it wasn't for the MBTA, Massachusetts Transit System. It was for some federal government branch of like ICE or DHS or something like that. So he does come from around the Boston area. He actually went to college at New England College, which is like 45 minutes up the road from me in Henniker, New Hampshire. That's where Joe Perry and Steven Tyler went to college. I don't think he went to college with them, though. ICE Director Todd Lyons says the two officers involved in the January 14th chase/shooting incident appear to have lied under oath and are being investigated by DOJ. This comes after DHS Secretary Kristi Noem defended them as firing in self-defense. So here's this. And there are so many of these stories, it's just ridiculous. So let me give you some more here. Federal judge excoriated the Trump administration for claiming it lacked the resources to give ICE detainees constitutionally required access to lawyers, despite surging law enforcement to detain them in the first place. The rebuke came as the administration also dropped criminal charges against two men it claimed had attacked an ICE officer who fired a gun in the fracas. Newly discovered evidence conflicted with the original headline. Very big. And Todd Lyons says the two officers involved in the shooting incident appear to have lied under oath. So at least he's admitting that. But Kristi Noem defended them and said that they were firing self-defense. Will she admit that either she got fooled or she was lying too? I wonder. I wonder if any of you guys work in these fields. If you don't want to hire somebody, you don't have to hire somebody. If you'd like to hire somebody, you should be free to hire that person. Otherwise, you're a slave. Because somebody else is telling you how to live your life in a peaceful way. You should be able to live your life in a peaceful way. Otherwise, you're a slave. To think that it's grown this bad from Hamilton onwards, and they thought they were breaking free from the king. Amazing. And then we got the dumb Monroe Doctrine. Oh, look what that's wrought. Wonderful. Cuba on fire. Just nuts. So crazy.